Today's video is for you if you feel like you're the only one making efforts in your relationship. You might have heard the saying that if they wanted to, they would. And there is truth to it in the sense that if someone really wants something, they'll eventually find a way. But there is also nuance to it. And not knowing that nuance personally almost cost me my now 17-year relationship. I used to think that if it felt like I was the only one making efforts, my only option was to leave. And I almost did. But today I want to offer you 7 reflections to help you figure out what's actually going on, whether there's room for your partner to step up, whether there's something that might need to shift on your end on how you're approaching things, or whether you really are tolerating something that just won't change. Because if you're anything like me, you don't want to settle for a relationship that's just okay. You don't want to spend your life wondering if you're the only one who cares. You want something that feels mutual, where you feel loved, you feel heard, you feel understood, and you feel chosen, not just tolerated. And you would prefer to not break up with your current partner. You'd actually prefer to find a way through. As many of you know, I've been with Denis, my now husband, for 17 years, and I'm 32, which means we practically grew up together. And during those years, we faced different types of challenges, whether it was external judgment from other people because we were doing things very differently than the norm, let's say, in society, or we went through years of long distance. We had our fair share of doubts. We almost broke up multiple times. And so today I want to take you back to one specific moment, one specific challenge. And for that, you want to picture me at 16. I had been with Dennis for about 2 years. I was visiting some family members, and I was literally sitting on a bench with my phone in my hand, ready to call him and break up. At that time, I still loved him, but I was just exhausted from the constant fighting that we were experiencing, the miscommunication, and I had started to feel resentful. I felt like we were stuck and like I was the only one putting in effort, at least from my perspective. In that moment, I just couldn't see a future with him if nothing changed. And so in this video, I'm going to be sharing a letter to my younger self in case you're in a similar place to where I was on that day in 2010. I'll walk you through 7 reflections that I wish someone had shared with my 16-year-old self, lessons that would have brought me a lot of clarity and peace of mind much sooner, that would have saved us from a lot of confusion, a lot of tension, and would have eventually helped us build this healthy, long term, and very loving relationship that we have today much quicker. There's a lot to cover, so I'll be splitting this into 2 parts. This is part 1, and part 2 is linked below if it's already available, and if it's not, subscribe if you don't want to miss it. As always, my content is not for abusive relationships, and every situation is unique, so take what resonates and leave the rest. Alright, so here's the letter. Dear younger me, I can see that you're ready to break up with Denis. I also know that part of you still loves him and wishes things could work out. But based on how things have been between you two, I understand why walking away feels like the only option right now. Before you make a decision, I want to walk you through a few things I've learned, both from experience and from helping others who've been exactly where you are. Because believe it or not, I'm a relationship coach today. All I'll ask is for you to have an open mind as we go through these reflections and to be gentle with yourself and with Denis if you notice things that could be done differently. The goal isn't to blame anyone. It's to get honest with yourself so you can figure out your next steps. Let's start here. The first reflection. Does Denis actually know how you feel? Sometimes, when it feels like we're the only one trying, it's not that our partner doesn't care. It's that they genuinely don't know. They don't know what we need, how we're really feeling, or how heavy this has gotten for us. What seems obvious to us might not be obvious to them. You experience the same situation differently. You have different expectations, different needs, and we all have blind spots, things we just don't see until someone points it out. So when it feels like we're the only one making an effort, the first question worth asking is, does my partner actually know I feel this way? Not have I hinted at it, not they should know by now, because honestly, we often think we've been clearer than we have. But the real question is, have I actually said it out loud in a way that's hard to miss? Sometimes the missing piece isn't effort, it's clarity. So before anything else, ask yourself, have I actually told Denis that I feel like I'm the only one making efforts? Have I expressed how much this is affecting me and why I feel this way? If the answer to any of these is no or I'm not sure, that's your starting point. And if you have communicated and nothing's changed, the next reflections are for you. Reflection 2. How you bring something up matters as much as what you're saying. I know how exhausting it is to feel like you're carrying everything. And when you try to bring it up, my guess is that the conversation turns into an argument. As much as it takes two to have a constructive conversation, the way we approach it can either open up the conversation or shut it down. We have a lot more influence than we think. What I'm seeing you, for example, do is ask Dennis to make certain efforts when you're already frustrated. And I get it, you are frustrated. You're tired, you're hurt. But here's what I've learned: when someone feels blamed or criticized, even if what you're saying is fair, it's hard for them to stay open. They might get defensive, shut down, or turn it into a fight about something else, and suddenly the real issue gets lost. I'm not saying you now have to walk on eggshells. I'm saying that there are certain things that give you the best chance of being heard. It's in your interest to be mindful of how you show up in conversations. To make this reflection more tangible, I've developed a simple framework I call love. Four things I've seen make the biggest difference in whether a conversation leads to a resolution or conflict, especially if it's a conversation that might quickly escalate. L stands for listening to yourself first. Before you bring up something important, get clear on what you're actually feeling, on what you need, and how you want to show up. When we're upset and don't take the time to check in with ourselves first, we become reactive. And when we're reactive, we feel like we have no control over our emotions and behaviors. In that state, we show up in ways that hurt the relationship. We say things we don't mean, we have trouble seeing solutions, we struggle to communicate clearly, we blame, we criticize, we see the negatives first. That's just how our brains work when we're upset, so when we're reactive. But the problem is that being in that state shuts down conversations, leads to bigger arguments, and leaves both people feeling more misunderstood and hurt than before. What you want is to communicate in a way that increases your chances of being heard, in a way that makes you and Dennis feel like a team instead of opponents, in a way that sets you up to prevent escalations and gives you peace of mind, even if the conversation is hard. You can be upset and be mindful of how you approach the conversation, but that starts with checking in with yourself first. How you show up influences the conversation. You can't guarantee how Dennis will respond. You can't control the outcome, but the way you approach him can either increase your chances of opening up the conversation or increase your chances of it becoming a dead end. Then O is about opening the conversation with intention. What we typically do when we want to talk about something important is say we need to talk, or just jump right into it. The problem is that if Dennis is in a different headspace, whether he's stressed, distracted, in the middle of something, he just won't have the capacity to really listen or be open to what you're saying. Catching someone off guard creates stress in their brain. For example, we need to talk might feel okay to you, but to the other person, it often sounds like you're in trouble. And now they're already defensive before you've said another word. That's just one example. Opening with intention means asking if it's a good time to talk. For example, hey, there's something on my mind I'd like to talk through. Is now okay, or is there a better time for you? It can also be sharing why the conversation matters to you. For example, I'm bringing this up because I care about us and something's been feeling off for me, rather than leading with frustration and blame. And it means speaking from your perspective instead of pointing fingers. For example, I've been feeling XYZ instead of you always, you never. Just like the first step is about checking in with yourself so that you don't show up reactive, this step is about creating the conditions for the other person to not be reactive either. You can't control Dennis or the outcome, like I said earlier, but you're setting the conversation up in a way that makes it safe to actually hear each other out. Then V is for validation. Validation is about understanding how you each see the situation, whether you agree with each other or not. I know that when it feels like you're the only one making efforts, chances are you'll go into the conversation with a case to prove. You've been keeping track, you know what you've been doing and what Dennis hasn't, and you come in ready to lay out all of the evidence. But one of the worst things you can do in a conversation is fact check. That's when you start arguing about what actually happened, trying to prove that you're right, not really hearing each other out because you're only focused on your truth. You might say, no, that's not what you said, or that's not how it happened, or you're remembering it wrong. The thing is, you each have your own subjective reality. You process information differently. You experience the exact same situation differently. So when you're going back and forth trying to prove your version is the correct one, no one ends up feeling heard. You're just ping ponging back and forth, and nothing moves forward. Dennis will have his own version. He might even feel like he has been making efforts, and he might even have his own frustrations. So if you're both trying to prove that your side is right instead of understanding each other, you'll leave the conversation feeling even more alone than before. Instead of debating facts, speak about your own experience. Share what's true for you, how you've been seeing the situation from your lens, and then get curious about how Dennis sees things. That's the validation part. You don't have to agree with his perspective, but being curious about each other's perspectives and avoiding fact checking helps you feel like two people trying to figure something out together instead of two people fighting to be heard. Then E stands for end with care. How you end a conversation matters just as much as how you open it, even if you didn't solve everything. That can be, I'm glad we talked about this, or thanks for taking the time, or what do you think we can agree on, or I know this conversation wasn't easy, but I appreciate you being open to it, or can we come back to this in a few days or in a few hours? I need time to process. Think of the end of a conversation like a landing. You can have a very smooth flight, but a rough landing. And what you will remember is a rough landing. Being mindful and intentional about how you end a conversation leaves you both feeling like it meant something, like you're moving forward together, even if there's still work to do, instead of feeling unsure and wondering, are we okay? Which creates stress, distance, and resentment. So, here are some questions that you can ask yourself to apply the love framework in conversations. When I bring things up with my partner, am I checking in with myself first, or am I approaching the conversation already reactive? Then, am I creating the conditions for my partner to actually hear me, or am I catching them off guard? In our conversations, am I trying to understand how they see things, or am I only trying to prove my side is right? Then, how do our conversations usually end? Do we both walk away feeling like we're on the same team or feeling more distant? And if I'm being honest, is there something I could do differently in how I approach these conversations? Then the third reflection is all about asking yourself, what does effort actually look like to you? Effort can look completely different to two people. And if you haven't defined what it means to you, your partner might be trying in ways you're not recognizing. Imagine you're aiming at a target. If you don't see the bullseye, you're going to miss, even if you're giving it everything you've got. You might be throwing real effort at it, but if you're aiming at the wrong spot, you won't be hitting the center. Nothing will land. And so that's what happens in relationships when we haven't gotten clear on what effort actually means to us. It's not the effort that's lacking, it's the direction. Dennis might be trying, but if he doesn't know where your bullseye is, so where he needs to aim at, he's going to keep missing. And so then you're frustrated because it seems like he's not trying, and then he's frustrated because nothing he does seems to be enough. And that's one of the most common patterns I see in relationships. There are different ways to figure out how you each define effort, and one of them is through the concept of love languages. The idea that we all give and receive love differently. I found this one to be the easiest one to understand and implement. The love languages concept suggests that some people feel most loved through words, for example, like hearing I love you, getting compliments, verbal appreciations. Others feel it through quality time, physical touch, acts of service, or gifts. When two people have different love languages and don't realize it, they can both be putting in effort and both feel like the other isn't showing up. For example, maybe you feel most loved when Dennis tells you how much you matter to him, but maybe he naturally shows love by doing things. For example, handling logistics, fixing problems, taking care of stuff so that you don't have to. And you might still be thinking, why doesn't he ever say how he feels about me? Why doesn't he express it? While he's thinking, I do so much. How does she not see that I care? Neither of you is wrong. You're just speaking different languages. But here's the thing, it's not enough to express love the way you want it to be expressed. You need to love someone the way they want to be loved. If not, you'll each be putting effort in the wrong place, even with the best of intentions. And just to take it a step further, because I know this is where you might get stuck as well, is that even if you've clarified your love languages, there might still be a translation problem. You might be saying you want more quality time, or support, or connection, but you and Dennis might not define those the same way. Think of it as your love language dialect. It's not enough to, for example, know that your love language is quality time. It's what kind of quality time makes you feel most loved. Is it long conversations? Is it doing activities together? Is it just being in the same room, even if you're doing your own things? I had a client a few years ago tell her partner that she wanted more quality time together. And he was so confused and said, "Well, we go on dates, we travel together, we spend every weekend together." And he really thought that he was trying. I mean, he was trying. But what she really meant was, "I need undivided attention. That's how I define quality time." And what bothered her is that when they were together, he was often on his phone. So she wasn't asking for more time, she was asking for a different quality of time together. Once they got specific, they agreed on something super simple. They agreed on having 30 minutes of focus time when they were together. No phones, be present, have eye contact. And it was a small tweak, but it made a real difference. So here are some questions you can ask yourself. What is my love language? What makes me feel most loved? What is his? How does he feel loved, understood, appreciated? And also, how does he tend to show love? Is it possible that he is making efforts, just not in the way that I need to receive them? And then, have I painted a picture of what I need? And if Dennis asked what that looks like concretely, would I have an answer? Being specific about what you need does not make it less meaningful. It gives your partner a real chance to show up for you. And then reflection 4. Are you giving change a real chance? Let's say you've had the conversations. You've been clear about what you need. And Dennis is trying. He's making an effort to show up differently, but he might not be consistent, or it doesn't look exactly how you pictured it, or it's taking longer than you hoped. Here's something I wish I'd understood earlier. Change takes time, especially when someone is learning to love you in a way that doesn't come naturally to them. Time alone isn't enough, though. You can think of it like going to the gym. You don't get fit after one workout. You don't even get fit after a week. So, yes, it takes time, but it also takes repetition and consistency before you see real results. And if someone told you this isn't working after your third session, you'd probably give up. Not because you weren't trying, but because you weren't given a chance to actually get there. The same thing happens in relationships. If Dennis is genuinely trying to show up differently, how you respond during that process really matters. You're either creating space for change to happen or you're shutting it down before it has a chance. And here's what can make this harder. When it feels like we've been the only one making efforts and we feel hurt by that, we start keeping score. We track what we're doing and what they're not. We build a case for why we are right to feel the way we feel. His efforts might become invisible, not because they're not there, but because when we're hurt, it's harder to see them. That's just how pain works. Our brains are naturally wired to notice what's wrong. It's called the negativity bias. And it exists because back when we were trying to survive in the wild, spotting danger was more important than appreciating a nice sunset. And so the brain that noticed the threat lived longer. So we evolved to scan for problems, to remember the bad stuff more vividly, to fixate on what's missing. That wiring helped keep us alive. But in relationships today, it works against us. The one thing the other person forgets overshadows the three things that they remembered. The gap gets all your attention and the effort becomes invisible. I'll often ask my clients, what's gone well between the two of you this week? And every time they can think of something, whether it was a kind moment, something their partner did differently, a small gesture. And then I ask, did you tell them? Almost always the answer is no. Not because they didn't notice, but because they were waiting for bigger changes. Or they saw five other things that weren't working and those took up all the space. If we want effort to continue and grow, we have to consciously notice what is working and say it out loud. That's positive reinforcement. We repeat behaviors that get acknowledged. We stop doing things that seem to go unnoticed. And that is not manipulation, it's just how we work. When someone feels like their efforts matter, they want to keep going. When they feel like nothing they do is enough, they eventually stop trying. It sounds basic, but acknowledging what is working shifts things. It builds momentum. So ask yourself, am I giving this change room to breathe or expecting the other person to get it perfect right away? Have I been keeping score? And is that making it harder to notice the other person's efforts? Then what is the other person doing that I could acknowledge? And have I been waiting for a perfect version before I give the other person credit? There's a difference between someone who isn't willing to try and someone who's still learning how to love you the way you need or showing love in their own way right now. Knowing which one you're dealing with matters, and how you respond to imperfect effort often determines whether it grows or fades. So now you have the first four reflections, and if you've been honest with yourself while going through them, you might already be seeing things a little differently. But there's more I need to share with you. Because even when you've communicated clearly, even when you've defined what you need, even when you've given change a real chance, that's only part of the picture. There are questions about yourself, your expectations, and your partner's willingness that we haven't explored yet. That's what I'll walk you through in part two. For now, I encourage you to sit with what's come up, and if you're open to it, to even journal on some of these questions to help you process things. With love, Alex.